few years ago, my manager decided to take a short vacation after months of continuous work. His schedule was incredibly packed, so this holiday was his only chance to rest. He chose to spend those days in Spain, where the sun, beaches, and tranquility awaited him. He went with his wife, and they planned to enjoy some time away from the stresses of work. First, everything was going well. During the initial days of his trip, he sent us pictures of Spain's tourist attractions, sharing moments of relaxation and fun. But in the middle of the week, something completely unexpected happened. While he was enjoying his time at a small restaurant in Barcelona, his phone suddenly rang. The call was from an unknown number, and when he answered, the shocking surprise came. It was the police from his hometown. At first, he thought it might be about a minor issue, perhaps a traffic incident or something similar. But that wasn't the case. The officer, speaking in a calm and somber tone, said, "We regret to inform you that your sister has passed away in a fire at her apartment. We need you to return immediately, and we'll send you all the details." Those words hit him like a thunderbolt to the heart. He felt a sudden dizziness, as though the ground beneath his feet had given way. His sister, whom he loved and cared for all his life, had been found in her burned apartment, and there wasn't enough time to save her. All the beautiful pictures he had sent us from Spain suddenly transformed into scenes from the nightmare he was now living. He hurriedly left the restaurant and headed to the nearest airport, ignoring the murmurs and comments he overheard about a massive fire that had engulfed an elderly woman's apartment. His mind was racing with countless thoughts, each one harsher than the last. Who was behind the fire? Was it an accident? And why couldn't his sister escape? The questions kept spiraling uncontrollably, but the only certainty he had was that his sister had died in a tragic way, and he needed to return as quickly as possible to fulfill his family duties. On the plane, his body remained in Spain, but his mind was elsewhere, envisioning the final moments of his sister's life, moments he would never truly know. My manager returned to his homeland as quickly as possible. The sky was dark, and the wind was cold, as if nature itself reflected the sorrow he felt. Upon arriving at the airport, he was greeted by police officers he had contacted hours earlier. They escorted him to the scene of the incident. Everything about the situation seemed strange, as though the world around him had turned into a foggy nightmare. His sister had passed away in her apartment, located in a quiet neighborhood. However, the fire that had consumed her apartment was devastating. When he arrived, he saw the area surrounded by police and firefighters still assessing the extent of the destruction. The doors were tightly sealed, and the windows were completely blackened with smoke stains. There was no sign of life inside the apartment, only charred and unrecognizable furniture. Investigators informed him that the fire had started in the kitchen and was so intense that part of the apartment had collapsed. Firefighters tried to extinguish the blaze quickly, but it was too late. It appeared that his sister had been trapped inside and couldn't escape, even though her apartment was on the first floor, where escape should have been possible if she had had the chance. The photographs taken by investigators and forensic experts at the scene were horrifying. They found some evidence that she had tried to contact someone, perhaps seeking help. But by the time rescuers arrived, it was too late, and they were unable to save her. My manager was in shock, faced with unanswered questions. Why hadn't she been able to escape? Was the fire deliberate? What had caused her to be trapped to the point where she couldn't get out, despite her apartment being on the first floor? He was overwhelmed by waves of anger, grief, and fear that something more sinister might be behind the fire. However, the investigators told him the investigation would take time, and for now, he needed to focus on the legal matters at hand. After dealing with the police, he attended his sister's funeral. The procession was long, and walking behind her casket was an unimaginable ordeal. He had no words, only a profound sense of emptiness and grief. His sister, who had always been there for him during tough times, was now gone. She left behind a world full of unanswered questions. Days of mourning passed, and his employers told him to take all the time he needed to grieve. Everyone understood the pain he was going through. Yet despite their support, he began to feel a sense of isolation. He had always been surrounded by work, and now work was the only thing that brought him a semblance of stability. After weeks of absence, he decided to return to his office. But what awaited him at work was far more than just a return to his daily routine. After weeks of sorrow and reflection, my manager finally decided to return to work. Monday was bright, and the office atmosphere was as quiet as ever, but something was missing. Despite everyone's sympathy for him, the void left by the death of his sister was unfillable, and he could feel it deeply. Over time, he began trying to rebuild his professional life, hoping to regain some control over his day. That morning, we invited him to the coffee room to express our condolences once again and offer him some support with simple words. We talked with him for a while until we felt that he was regaining a bit of his composure. After about half an hour, he smiled and said he needed to get back to work. We didn't want him to push himself, but we understood his decision. Everyone in the office knew he needed this challenge, this activity, to feel some stability amid the chaos he was experiencing. He entered his office as usual and sat in his chair behind the desk. He looked at his computer, opened it slowly, and took a deep breath. The past days had been filled with pain and questions, but he needed to find a way to close that painful chapter. He began checking his emails and then decided to review his answering machine. The first voice he heard on the answering machine was his sister's. His hand froze in place. It was the first time he'd heard her voice since her death, and he felt a strange sensation creeping over him. As the voice echoed through the room, he felt an unnatural disturbance stirring in his chest. Her voice was clear but hoarse, as if she had been speaking amidst immense pain. It trembled, and there was a distinct urgency in her words. "Help me! Help me! I'm trapped and can't breathe." Her voice was filled with fear and despair, as if she was desperately trying to reach out for help in her final moments. The sound clawed at his heart, as though a ghost from the past had returned to haunt him. My manager couldn't move his hand, as if the earth had swallowed everything around him. His face was pale, his eyes wide open, trying to process what he was hearing. How could this be? How could her voice be recorded on the answering machine? The burn department and the final moments his sister lived held secrets far beyond what he could have imagined. But the most terrifying part was when the voice abruptly stopped, as if the connection had been suddenly cut. An overwhelming silence filled the room. He didn't know what to do. Should he go to the police and tell them what he'd heard? Was it just a technical glitch? But how could he explain the voice coming from his machine, pleading for help in those last moments? It was another shock, one that left his mind in complete disarray. The message shone a light on something dark and inexplicable. Everything in that moment felt surreal, as though time itself had frozen, and the world around him began to unravel. Hours passed after the incident, but the image left by the voice in his mind would never fade. Deep down, he knew there was something more behind the fire, something unexplainable that continued to follow him, haunting him in every moment after that call. That horrifying message became part of a mystery he could never solve. Over time, he began to feel as though a ghost from the past was chasing him, and that he would forever live with that anguished voice, reminding him that there are things in life we can never fully understand.